What's up, YouTube? Welcome back for part 2 of the timing belt snap valve bendy engine removal repair deal video series. How do you like that? So yeah, I've got managed to get the car inside. This is actually a continuation from the last video, although I haven't really started into it yet. So I do have all the parts, and I'm ready to start pulling this thing out. And I want to show you quite detailed on what exactly it is I do removal wise and move aside kind of deal to get one of these out. A turbo to an NA motor are quite different, and an automatic to a 5-speed is a little different. So I mean, with those things in mind, this is a NA EJ253 automatic, so very easy to get out of there. I don't imagine I'll spend a lot of my evening. To be honest, I know I could, if I race at it, I could probably have this out in under an hour and a half. I think I've timed myself in an hour and 15 minutes before. I'm not going to race myself today though. But really, it can't take a whole lot longer than that. There's just not that much to take apart. But yeah, well, I'll get the camera so I can take it under the car with me, because that's where I begin, and I'll show you where I start. So I'm underneath the front of the car, and basically where I'm going to start is with the exhaust, motor mounts, and maybe like this fan shroud kind of thingy up in the front, heat shield for the fans. But here, so there's one of the motor mount nuts, and this sway bar, I don't expect it's very much larger than stock, if it is, because it is a white line. But I mean, that's the bolt is directed straight at it, so I've got to try and get a flex socket in there. Mind you, I'm using air tools for all this too, so it makes life a little bit easier in some situations. I got to get those exhaust nuts off. Some of them may wind out with the stud. And over on the other side as well, the same thing over there. And then the bolts holding this, or the little screws or whatever they are, holding that heat shield on in the front. And that way I can like at least go about getting the fans out and whatnot. So I've got it's actually a 3/8 flex with a little extension. And it'll get on there, but I mean, it's not going to be able to back it right off, because the socket's probably just going to jam up on the sway bar. But I think it's going to get in there and turn, at least loosen it, or take it right off. Get the other side. So for a lot of people, that's a strange place to start. But as you'll watch, I just continue on here. You kind of want that stuff out of your way. When you start to drain the oil and whatnot, you just move on to other things. We need to get these exhaust nuts up here. I'll give you guys a really good angle from here. I'm just coming up through here with an extension in the gun. So then the whole exhaust is loose now. You see. Now the next thing we want to do is get these. I'm going to get those screws out of the heat shield in the front. This heat shield for the fan. I don't think it actually gets in the way really, but I don't like it. See, a ratcheting wrench works best, or even a small quarter ratchet with the 10 millimeter. So now we've got that off. I'm at the point where I'll start to drain fluids. So I've just got the oil drain plug to let go and start draining oil. And then there's this plug right here, and I'll try and crack it and see if we can get some coolant to flow out of there. You see, we're just getting a slow dribble right now because it can't really pull air into the system, but I'll let the radiator tap off and start getting it to flow. Just like that. Now I'll get a pan and wrench, start draining that oil. Now that the fluids are draining, I'll come back up top and start taking off some of the accessory and outside stuff. So I like to have a lot of stuff out of the way. Want to do that mass airflow connector. Just 8 mil. Get rid of these clamps. And this air box can get you, because there's a nut on the inside of here that can be tricky to get off, and a lot of times it's actually seized and causes you a problem. Got a 10 mil bolt way down here. And then with just a little bit of prying, there's the AC hoses kind of go over this little bracket, which appears it's already broken, and the whole air box will come right out of there. And with the 10 mil stall on the gun, I come right over to this air reservoir, air dampener, whatever they want to call it. Take the two 10 mil bolts that kind of hold it to its brackets, and undo the 8 millimeter on the clamp. These guys usually have a couple emissions or venting lines, and this one just kind of pops out like that. Usually got these squeeze clamps down in here on these hoses. A little turn gets them off. Usually one on both sides for both valve covers. And then just a little bit of wiggling. You get another one down here. Appears to be on a fucking clamp. Shit. And then you usually got a hose leading to the brake booster so that it can have applied vacuum to it. Just take that and kind of put it back over the side here. A lot of the older fuel lines have just these regular style stainless steel fuel injection clamps, but these ones actually have the quick connects. So it should just be you push the actual line towards the steel line and then push on these little guys, and it should release the whole line. Sometimes you need a tool. Good practice is actually wear safety goggles when you're doing this. Another option is to ensure that you've relieved the fuel pressure some way, somehow. Not to say it can't even, flick a little 5 psi at you or something. So the way I'll go about doing this is just undoing the old style stainless steel clamp here, and it's just it's a returnless system, so I just have the feed line and the evap line to let go, or the venting line. Then you just take a standard bolt you have lying around, put it in the end of the hose. And then just put your clamp back up onto it. At least you can let it flop around and it's not gonna, because the rails and the fuel lines going underneath the intake manifold will still have quite a bit of fuel in them. So just let that sit there. And something else is good practice that I didn't do is disconnect the battery. Because if we were to turn the key on right now, the fuel pump's gonna prime and it's gonna shoot fuel out of here like you wouldn't believe. Another way to go about it is pull the fuel pump relay or the fuse if you can find it. Just taking off the negative lead will be fine. Just tuck it down in behind there. Now just kind of move across the front again and get rid of this little bracket. Upper hose can come out, the reservoir, these fans can come out of the way, and I'll probably pluck the rad out with the fans actually. Take these top rad supports out. Probably wouldn't hurt to actually get an upper hose. Yeah, that guy did not want to come off there. So before we can get the rad out, a couple things. Lower hose is still not off, and if I remember correctly, the transmission cooler lines are actually hooked up to the bottom of this thing, and I'll have to get back underneath and disconnect those before we can pull it out. So yeah, with everything off at the bottom, all I should have to do is kind of just grab this lower hose and kind of guide it up through. This will be sitting, the rad will be sitting down on two pegs, and you may have to give it a good wiggle and pry because of the insulation that's down there. And then it should just lift up out of here. Kind of like so. And I like having that rad out of the way. There's so much potential for damage when you're doing this work. It doesn't take any time to take out of there. You got to take the hoses and everything off of it anyway. Just take it out of there and get it out of your way. It's peace of mind. So I'll continue on with a couple things in the front here. I like to take this AC and get it out of the way. I like to take that power steering pump and get it out of the way. You need to get some electrical, actually it's just the alternator electrical, and I guess for the AC compressor, maybe the cam position as well. But that little harness kind of unplugs and flops over to the side out of the way. So I'll just let some of these wire retainers go. We'll undo the AC compressor clutch. We'll get the harness to come up away from the oil filler. And then I'll come over to the alternator and undo the actual sensing lead for it. Make sure your battery's disconnected before you're doing this. And then I'll fish this harness out through here and just over behind the camera. And then I'll just get rid of the alternator now. Careful, you don't want to lose him. It drops off the backside there and falls underneath the intake. And the alternator, usually just some good wiggles. You don't want to get your hands trapped in anywhere because you can get them pinched pretty good. And it just comes out of there. Then we'll come back to this power steering pump. This is the power steering pump actually has what you call a high pressure switch, so it detects a lot of pressure being built by the pump and usually bumps idle. It tells the computer to bump idle a couple hundred RPM. So that's why when you hear, sometimes when you steer really hard one way, you actually hear the engine idle up. So it comes through here. I'll just disconnect the crank sensor and the oil pressure switch. The oil pressure switch on this one's really dry. They're common for leaking. You've got one bolt in the back here. It's a little bit longer. You have to get down in there. Then once those guys are out of the way, this can just go right over to where the airbox was, completely out of the way over there. And then we can move on to the AC compressor. I wasn't sure about this one back down in here, but that flex socket that I used earlier works great. Get rid of this one. Maybe this one. And the last one is actually down here. And then this guy should be able to just lift up and kind of go over here somewhere. And just a bungee cord like that can wrap around the compressor and then just kind of loop it around somewhere, and it can hold it up out of your way. And over here we just got these two O2 sensor connectors, and it should just be a push down and release. And this guy, guy's a little tight, but you want to leave these ones with the exhaust. So a few more little things here at the back. I forgot this vent line for the fuel system. Got to get these heater hoses off. So I want to push the coolant pan further underneath there. And just pull the hose up here somewhere out of the way. So yeah, actually, believe it or not, we're getting down to it. Got the flywheel bolts to go, or the torque converter bolts, and the bell bolts, some electrical connections over on the other side. And this thing should pluck out of there at this point. So back to the other side here. We want to get rid of this. Need to disconnect this bulkhead connector. I think you just yeah, you pry up on here, and this that wire holder comes apart, and then these you just kind of push down here, and that comes apart, and the whole thing will just pop out like that. And yeah. So we need to get down to the torque converter bolts, and I think if we just remove the throttle body, I can do that because I've already had the throttle body off to get that crank pulley off when I was putting the time belt on it. So I think just the 4 10mm bolts would get the throttle out of the way, and then maybe I can get to the torque converter bolts from there. So I'll just disconnect some of the electrical. Got like the map sensor, EGR valve. We'll just leave this harness over here for a second. And the intake manifold's got to come off eventually, but I like to pull the engine out using the manifold as long as it's aluminum. If it's a plastic manifold, I go about it otherwise. So loosening off the torque converter bolts, I got a 22mm on the end of a power bar that I'm going to put on the crank, and I'll use that to turn the crank around to the point that I can see these torque converter bolts through the little window here in the. If you guys can have a look down here, see that little window down in there, and you can see that 12mm bolt, and I can just get this 3/8 ratchet to come down in here and sit on there. And as long as I can get that loose, then I'll just turn the crank, spin it around till the next one comes up, and loosen it and get it out until they're all out. I also want to take out this pitch mount because it allows a lot more movement. It'll actually just bind and it'll jam up everything if it's not out of there. Other than that, though, we just got the bell bolts left. You can see the 2 right here, and then there's 2 further down below there. They might be a little bit more difficult to get. And the same over on the other side, but we already have the top one out. So literally just 7 bolts and the pitch stop, and we're ready to lower the car down and try and loosen this thing up and get it out. So I've gotten this bracket out of the way that retained all the wiring and everything. I've got the wiring pushed aside, and now I've got really good access to all these bolts going down the side. So you can see I unbolted this bracket that retained the wiring. I got the wiring pushed aside, and I get really good access to the bell bolts now. And I've already cracked this one down here loose. Yeah, okay. So I'll go for this top one here. And then the next one. But I'd like to get this one out before. Well, maybe I can get on that one. There we go. Battery lead off of the starter motor. Again, always make sure that your battery's disconnected before doing this. Then there's just there's a bracket that holds these cables, and I think I'm just going to get the whole bracket out of my way. It'll release all these fuel lines too. Now I can just get this guy right out of my way. I mean, you can see the Still got these heater pipes that are in the way. There's a EGR tube, the steering shaft. So I mean, it's definitely tighter to work, but you got to make do with it. See, I got the wrench sitting on that bottom one. I'm gonna see if I can't get it to loosen with the double wrench. I heard something crack. I think it was my elbow. Don't be a fucking mechanic. Oh, we got our pitch stop mount left. And that guy's out of the way. And at this point we should have a freed up engine, which it looks like we do. At this point I feel like I'm ready to pull, so I've rolled back the car back to the garage door. I've still got a few inches of space there. It gives me just enough room to sneak the crane in the front here, and as long as I can get the motor up, then I should be able to walk the crane along and get the motor out over top the car and not have to open up the garage door and have the car sticking out of it. Which I've done in the past. It's just, this is just a tiny bit longer car, so but we'll see how it goes. So this is what I use to pull engines, and this is a seatbelt cut right out of a car, out of an old used car. And really soft, and I mean that braid in there that does not tear and does not come apart. Also, when you tie it, the wide, just being how wide it is, it can be quite easy to get the knots back apart and reuse it. I really can't tell you how many engines I pulled with this seatbelt. So now I got to just lift it, just the weight of it's just lifted on the rope. So I'll take my service jack and I'll put a block of wood on it, slide it underneath the transmission pan, and just get the block towards the tranny, so that when I shake this thing and release it, the tranny just doesn't go falling onto the front subframe. It'll just kind of cradle itself down onto the jack and be supported there. Be that. I'm just about getting away from the car, but the top of the crane is about to hit my shop plate, so I gotta start lowering it soon. I do have an engine stand, but unfortunately I'm not going to be able to situate it in here to actually do this. I remember now, the last car I did, when I got it back, I actually steered it forward a little bit, and I steered the front of the car over to that corner of the shop, and then I had enough room to set up the stand here. So as you can see, I got my trusty Napa pail. Let's see if it'll hold this guy up for me. Well, it didn't crush the pail anyway. There we go. Oh yeah, that'll work great. Alright, you guys got a better idea? So this will be the end of part 2 of the timing belt brakey intake valve bendy videos. Basically, we've done diagnosis in part 1 and engine removal in part 2. We'll be doing disassembly in part 3 next, so the heads will be coming off this block. Hopefully I can do the job right here, so that's what I intend to do. So yeah, thanks for watching. Please leave a thumbs up if you like this video, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave your questions and comments further down below, and I'll see you in the next one.